Pretend with me for a minute that this file box is actually my C drive. Now, inside this file box, which is my C drive, well, I've got a lot of data in here. Like, for example, I've got an operating system, and kind of gets his own little special place. I'll put it right there. And then I'm going to have, oh, I don't know, some music. Oh, for you younger people, this is what we called a CD. We've got some videos. I've got a bunch of documents. And the thing is, I start filling up my drive with more documents. I start filling up my drive with all this stuff. Well, I want to share it. Now, I got to be careful when I say share it. What I want to do is give other people access to it. For example, my music. I want people to be able to listen to my music, but I don't want them to add to the folder that it's in, but I want them to be able to listen to it. I might have some documents where I want them to be able to add documents, but on these documents in this other folder, if there's a document in there, they can add to it, but they can't delete it. You get the idea? There's all these different things I want to do with all of these files and folders that are on my drive. And if you want to do super what we call granular stuff like this, Microsoft Windows, particularly running the NT file system, is the absolute king of this level of control. Now, the challenge you run into is that I also have some files over here. I don't want anybody to look at these files. What's my payroll or something like that? So I need to have very careful control, not only who can access this drive, but who can access what folders, who can access certain documents, and I need this to be very flexible for every different folder and document that's in this drive. And NTFS does an amazing job. So what I want to do is we're going to go over to my computer right now, and I've got a folder. I want you to take a look at this real quick. So I've made this folder called CompTIA A off my C drive. Now, if I right-click on this and select Properties, now let's just go right into this thing called Security. Do you see all these weird things? Full control, modify, read and execute, list folder contents, read and write. These are called NTFS permissions, and they're absolutely incredible. These allow us to have very granular controls. For example, I can set it up so that a person can only read the file. They can't make any changes, they can't delete it, but they can read it. I can set it up so that somebody can add files to a folder, but that's all they can do. I can set it up so that they can access a folder, but they can't read the contents of it. Why would someone do something crazy like that? Well, there's good reasons. The bottom line is, first of all, I've got an entire episode where we're going to go into these permissions in great detail. Right now, I don't want you to worry about that. What's important to me is that if we have all of these super duper permissions, how do I give the user Bob or the user Janet what permissions to whom, and how is this all tied together? The bottom line is we need users and groups. Let me show you some basic concept of how users and groups work with NTFS permissions. So I've got this computer right here, and it has a folder in it called C:\Timmy. Now, there are 3 users that have local user accounts on this computer. There's Janet, and there's Bob, and there's Pat. Janet has full control over that Timmy folder. She can do anything she wants. Bob can only read the contents of the Timmy folder, and Pat can read all the contents, and if he wants to add some files to the Timmy folder, well, he can do that. So in this situation, we're adding permissions directly to the Janet account, directly to the Bob account, directly to the Pat account. The problem here is that this can get complicated quickly. Janet may have full control of the Timmy folder, but Janet's an important person, so we're giving her all kinds of other kind of permissions to other folders and such. So she might have a read-only permission here and a read and write permission there and another full control permission there. We keep adding all these permissions to the Janet account. Well, it works fine except for one problem. What if Janet quits? All of a sudden, we now have a big problem where we have to get a new hire in, and we have to try to recreate all of those same permissions to Jane, who replaces Janet. So it's always a bad idea to apply permissions to user accounts. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to create something called a group, which I'm going to manifest as nothing but a name tag. So Jane is in the accounting department, so we're going to make a group called accounting and put her account into that group. Bob is a member of human resources, so we'll make a human resources group, and Pat is part of production, so he will get a production group. What we're going to then do is apply those permissions not to the accounts, but to accounting itself. So the accounting department has full control of C:\Timmy. The human resources group can read anything in the Timmy folder, and production can read or write. The beautiful part is that if somebody quits, all we do is delete their account, create a new user account, and add them to that particular group. Now, a couple of things about groups. Number one, an individual user account can be a member of multiple groups. So what will happen if you're a member of 2 or 3 different groups that all have some type of permission to a particular folder, it becomes cumulative. So you basically add all the permissions together. The other thing is that you can have groups within groups. It happens all the time, especially in more enterprise environments. So you can have a lot of complexity and fun. The secret is how do we manage all this? How do we create users and modify them and delete them in groups? Well, I'm going to have to save that for another episode. If you're going to be managing users and groups, well, Microsoft ought to give you a place to do it, right? And man, oh man, does Microsoft do that in Windows. In fact, there's at least 3 different places to do this within the Windows environment. So let's take a look at all of them, starting with the easiest and then going to where the cool kids hang out, okay? First of all, the place we want to go to is in Settings. So here in Settings, we go to Accounts. Here's me all logged in. There's my name. Here's this thing that says Total Home / Michael M. and then Administrator. First of all, I'm logged into what's called a domain. So I don't just log locally into my computer, I'm logged into some big server. If you were just in your house, it would probably just say Michael M. And then I am in a group called Administrator, well, because I'm a cool administrator. So what I want to do here is have a little fun. First of all, let's create an account. So we go to Other People. Now it has 2 choices here, and what's actually interesting, you can do either of these. What they're trying to do here is to get you to log into a Windows domain, and here they're just trying to create a local account, but to be honest, either of these will work. So let's go ahead and add someone else to this PC. Now Microsoft just loves Microsoft accounts, so they're trying to create an online account. It will still be a local account here, but it allows you to turn on OneDrive and your mail and all that stuff at the same time. I'm not a big fan of them personally, some people like them. So I don't have this person's sign-in information. So it wants me to create a Microsoft account. I'm going to skip that. I'm just going to make a regular old local account on this computer. And I'm going to call this person Bob. I'm going to give it a password. And we got to go through the silly security questions. All right, I have just made an account called Bob. Now he is a local account, but that's really all we've got on this. So we can click on Change Account Type, and we have 2 choices, Administrator and Standard User. Windows comes with a lot of built-in pre-made groups. 2 of those groups are Administrator and Standard User. In the Windows world, any account that's a member of the Administrators group is the super duper administrator account. So if you look in Windows, you always see an administrator account. There's really nothing special about it other than the fact that it's in the administrators group. That's all there is to it. So if I want to, I can make Bob an administrator just by doing that. And now Bob's an administrator. Using settings to create user accounts is pretty basic. It doesn't have a lot of features. So we're going to dial it up a little bit. And the next thing I'm going to show you is how to make a user account from the control panel. So just for fun, I went ahead and logged in as Bob. He's a local administrator, so I should be able to do anything I want. So let's go ahead and start up Control Panel. And this time we're going to find user accounts. These are alphabetical, so you always start at the bottom. And now I've logged in as Bob. You can see he's a local administrator right there. Okay, so first of all, if you want to, this is where you can change your account name. You can change your account type. But what I'm interested in right here, and the reason we see this is because we are administrators for this computer. So I see I've got two accounts here. One of the things I can do is add a user account. And again, here comes Microsoft just really wanting us to do that. We're going to do a local account, and we're going to call it Janet. Not Janbet, Janet. And I've now made a Janet account. So what can we really do to this account? We can change the account name, change the password, that could be handy. Let's change the account type. So once again, all we get are two choices here. The standard user, a regular user, or just a user, and an administrator. So I'm just going to leave it as Janet for right now. The problem with the two tools I've shown you so far is that they're pretty limited in scope. I mean, we could create a user, we could delete a user if we wanted to, but like we could only make them a member of the administrators, which is like the super account, or we could make them a standard user, or we just say user account. Well, Mike, weren't you saying we could do accounting and stuff like that? You can. However, the challenge is you can't do it with these default tools. Look, Microsoft knows that most people are not going to be messing with creating complicated groups and stuff like that on basic accounts. If I made this computer a member of a domain, we'd see some other features. But for right now, in order to get to the real power of users and groups, we have to go to something called local users and groups. It's one of the oldest applications in Windows. It's really old. Let's fire it up. The best way to get to local users and groups is through Control Panel, and it's here in Administrative Tools and under Computer Management. Let's get this over so you guys can see it. There it is, Local Users and Groups. This is a very, very powerful tool. So let's go ahead and create a new user. Well, first of all, take a look at this. Wait a minute. Sure, there's Janet. Sure, there's Mike. Sure, there's Bob. But what are these other accounts? Well, first of all, do you see the down arrow? These accounts are disabled. Windows by default makes certain accounts and just disables them. A guest account's nice. For example, if you have a website or something and you want people to be able just to get to your website, this works out pretty well. Plus, you'll see a lot of strange guys like this, WDAG utility. I'm not sure who uses that, but it's some kind of default account. So you're always going to have that. Now, if you really want to see some defaults, check this out. Windows comes with a bunch of default groups. So if you take a look very carefully here, you'll see administrators. We know that one. We'll see users, what the other application's called standard users. But there's some other stuff here. For example, power users. If administrators are the super duper accounts that can do just about everything, power users are only one click beneath them. The one thing that the administrator account can do that power users cannot do is that if somebody were to quit, for example, on this system, I could log in as an administrator and take control of all of their stuff. So power users are very powerful, but they can't take control of other users' account stuff. So other things are kind of interesting. Performance log users and performance monitor users, backup operators. Groups like these aren't really for people, but they're really for programs. Remember, when you log in, any program you fire up is running under your name. So even your own computer system has an account. We have these groups so that if somebody were running like Performance Monitor, it could monitor the performance for everything, even stuff that they don't have control over. So we need these kinds of accounts. Same with backup. If somebody's running a backup and we need to back up Bob and Mike's stuff as well, then it can handle that for us. So we need these special groups to allow us to deal with other kind of weird stuff like that. All right, so let's go back in and let's go ahead and create a user. So I just right click in a blank area here, hit new user. And the username is going to be Timmy. We don't have a Timmy yet. And the full name is anything you want to write in here. Give them a password. Now here's some features we didn't see with the other ones. Number one, user must change password at next login. So a lot of times we can throw in a temporary password and we'll say please log in and then change the password. I'm going to uncheck that for right now. User cannot change password. Not probably a good idea, but we could put it in there. Password never expires. We can set it up so that passwords will expire after 30 days or 60 days. We'll go ahead and leave this one up and running. And here's a handy one. Account is disabled. If somebody quits, we don't want to just delete their account. Remember, when you create a user account on a computer, you're also creating their own desktop and their own documents and all their own personal stuff. And there might be a chance we would need access to that. So typically, if somebody quits or even goes on vacation, we disable the account, and here's the place we can do something like that. All right, let's go ahead and create it. Now it's actually cool here. You'll notice it goes right back to blank because if you're using this, they're assuming you've got to make a lot of accounts. So we'll just go ahead and hit close. Now, so we have made the Timmy account. But the thing is, notice we didn't really make Timmy a member of any group. So I'm going to right click on this and we're going to go to Properties and we can go to Member Of, and I can make him a member of anything I want. In fact, let's go ahead and make him a member of administrators. Unfortunately, at this level, you better know the name of the group or you're going to be in trouble. So administrators, don't forget the S. I can click on Check Names. It underlined everything, so it's happy. And I've now made Timmy a member of administrators. So really the place to go is local users and groups for users, but it also works for groups. Let's go back in here and make some of those cool groups. So I want to make a group called Accounting, and this is the place to do it. I'm going to type in duh, it's for accountants. So I've made the group, but it's got to have some members, so I'm going to put Timmy in there. And again, you have to have the account names just right here. The fact that it underlined it showed that I did it right. If I typed T-I-M-Y, I would have got an error code. And now I've made Timmy a member of that group, and I've created the group as well. So where did he go? There he is. There's accounting right there. We can open that up, and we can see that Timmy is a member of accounting. For most of us, particularly at home or in very small offices, just using settings or user accounts in the control panel will do a fine job of setting stuff up. For a lot of situations, just having a standard user and administrators is more than enough. However, if you really want to get into the real power of NTFS, you've got to go to local users and groups. So you've got some resource you want to share with other people. Well, in order to let other people have access to it, you're going to have to give them permissions. Now, Microsoft will manifest this as sharing. However, you've got to be a little bit careful here because we live in a strange world. Number one, NTFS doesn't care whether you log on locally to the same computer as the person who shared it or whether you were in Toledo, Ohio. So the network share aspect isn't really the same as just sharing something within NTFS. When we get into network chapters later, we're going to talk about network shares, which are a little bit of a different animal. At this point, really all we're talking about is sharing among different NTF users. Okay, so you ready to try this? It's really easy. The best place to start is with Timmy. So I've got this volume called D. There's not much in it. I got some virtual machines. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call him Timmy. So I'm logged in as Bob. So what I want to start off is let's take a look at the properties right now. And what we're going to take a look at isn't sharing, don't go over here, go over to security. Right now, these are the default NTFS permissions for this particular folder. So as you can see, by default, all users get read and execute, list folder contents, and read. So let's go ahead and discuss each of these NTFS permissions. Now, what I got to warn you about is that NTFS permissions can be applied to folders or they can be applied to files. And they're a little bit different. So let's go ahead and run through these real quick to make sure you're really clear on the different types of NTFS permissions. So let's start with a folder. First of all, we have full control, which basically means if you have full control NTFS permissions for a folder, you can do anything you want. You can change its name, you can delete it, you can delete files in there, anything you want. Next is modify. That enables you to read, write, and delete both files and subfolders. Read and execute means you can see the contents of the folder and any subfolders, as well as run any executable programs or associations. They mean files like a Word document in that folder. Next is list folder contents. That means you can see what is in that folder or any of its subfolders. After that is read. That allows you to view the folder's contents and open any file in the folder. Last is write. That enables you to write files and create new files and folders. Some of the differences between these permissions is pretty subtle. For example, with read, I can see anything in the folder, but with read and execute, I can see anything within the folder, plus I can run any executables. Now, somebody new to this would go, Mike, who came up with this stuff? They did decades of research to come up with the best type of permissions to give the best kind of granularity. These types of permissions are pushing 40 years old and nobody's changed them. You know why? Because they're fantastic. Let's do it again, this time for files. So if you have full control on a particular file, you can do anything you want with it. You can delete it, you can edit it, you can add to it, you can change its name. In fact, not only can you do that, you can give other people permission to it. Modify means you can read, write, and delete the file. Read and execute allows you to open and run the file. You can run it if it's an executable. Read allows you to open a file. So if it's a Word document, you can open up in Word. And write enables you to open and write to the file. Number one, don't panic to try to memorize all these. Well, first of all, I think everybody should know them if you're in tech. However, the A+ exam does not specifically go into detail saying you need to know every one of these NTFS permissions. I, Mike Myers, Alpha Geek and Super Nerd, says any good tech should know how to do NTFS. Okay, let's keep playing with this a little bit. This time I want to go back to Timmy. So here I've got Timmy. And what I'm going to do with Timmy is I'm going to specifically give a user permissions. Now normally we wouldn't do this. We just give individual groups permissions, but let's have some fun. So we're going to edit, and I'm going to add Mike. Let me check the names, make sure I typed it in right. Yep, hooray. So I've got Mike in here. Now right now, Mike, because he's a user, has the same permissions any user might have. But I'm going to give him everything but full control. We leave special permissions alone. That's strange and weird and dangerous. So we're going to hit apply. And OK. So now we know Mike has everything but full control of the Timmy folder. So let's open that up. Nothing's in here. Now watch this. I'm going to create another folder in here. Call it Tammy. Now take a look at the permissions. Let's just use Mike as an example. Notice, first of all, these are grayed out, but Mike has the same permissions he did before. What you're looking at here is called inheritance. If you have a folder and you put a file in it, that file by default will be taking on the same NTFS permissions as the folder it was in. Any subfolders, the same game. So inheritance is a big deal. So now I want you to come back in here and take one more peek. You'll notice there's a whole other column here called deny. Now, right now there's not much I can do with it, but watch this. I'm going to go back to Timmy. So we can see here in Timmy that Mike has the permissions we saw earlier, but watch this. If I click on Edit, we can actually go through something called Deny. The whole idea of deny is to stop inheritance. There could be a situation where Mike gets all of these permissions, but there's another subfolder way down here, and we don't want Mike to have those permissions. We can go ahead and put a deny in there, and it will stop Mike from having the same permissions he had before. In the NTFS world, and by the way, there are books this thick that go into NTFS permissions, using deny is kind of a, you've messed up somewhere, you didn't organize your NTFS permissions properly, and it's going to give you a problem. All right, for the exam, it's important that you're comfortable with the concept of NTFS permissions. Number one, NTFS permissions don't care whether you've jumped onto the computer locally or you're logging in via the network or you're connecting from Timbuktu. It makes no difference to NTFS. It has to do with the local account that you have on that system. Number two, just because NTFS doesn't care where you're coming from, the fact that you have to go through something called a network share does. You can't get to a particular resource through the network unless you go through a whole different second step that says, I'm going to share it on the network. And we're going to save that when we get into networking. So there's a bit of a difference there. The last thing is that NTFS permissions, while a little bit complicated, actually make sense if you work with them a little bit. And keep in mind, inheritance is a very big deal. If you make a folder, remember, anything you put in it is going to get the exact same permissions. Microsoft's NTFS pretty much has a lock on very granular control of file permissions. However, it's not the only game in town. Both Linux and Mac OS also have this feature. However, theirs is a bit simpler based on the attitude that you don't really need that much granularity. Now, to understand how these work, we need to understand the concept of owner, group, and everyone. Let me show you. I have an account on my Linux machine called Mike. I've actually very creatively made my own group called Mike because I don't really share it with anybody. So when I log in as Mike and I'm in the group called Mike. I'm also in some other groups, but that'll get me started. So I'm working away on my Linux box and I'm using a program called LibreOffice, which is a wonderful Word documenting program, and I create a file called timmy.odt. Now, the moment I save this file to my computer, I now have read, write, and execute privileges. Read means I can actually read the file and take a look at it. Write means I can modify the file. It means I can append the file. I can do anything. I can delete the file actually even. And X stands for execute. Let me explain that for a minute. The Linux world is filled with script files. A script file is basically just a text file that has the ability to actually run like an executable program. Of course, Linux has plenty of executable programs as well. By placing the execute permission on that file, that means I can run it like an actual program. So if I have a script file and I want to really run it, I have to have the permission of execute. Got the idea? Let's keep going. The second set of permissions are for my group. So anybody who's a member of the Mike group, and I can set this read, write, execute as well. Now keep in mind, if I wanted to, I could set this up so it's not executable for people within my group, but I like everybody in my group, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it executable. And the last one is for everyone. Everyone is exactly like it sounds, everybody. I don't want anybody messing with this, so I'm going to just give read. I'm not going to give write permission, and I'm not going to give execute permission. When you're messing with these types of files, you have 9 different sets of permission to set. Luckily, it's usually pretty straightforward within a graphical user interface like I got here with Ubuntu Linux. So I've got a couple of files here, and I've gone ahead and created these. So what I want to do is show you the permissions as they're currently configured. So I'm going to go down to Properties and look at Permissions. Now you can see as the owner, I have read and write permission. Now that makes sense if you think about it. This is a word processing document. It's not truly an executable file, and it's not even a script. So I definitely would not want to have execute privileges on here. If I wanted to change that, I could go to read only. For the group mic, I have read and write. And then for others, everybody else, I have read only, or even I could just say they have no permission at all. Now right here, this thing has checked allow executing file as a program. That would be a bad idea, so I'm going to uncheck that. You might be thinking to yourself, well, Mike, that's great for Linux, but you've been talking about Linux and Mac OS in this entire episode. Hey, how about a little Mac OS here? Well, buddy, you got it. So what I'm going to do is put up a little screen. Take a look at this. So what we're looking at right here are the permissions for one example file on the Mac OS. Notice that we've got the creator owner, we've got the group, and we've got everyone, and you'll notice it's read and write and read permissions. How easy is that? So whether you're using Linux or Mac OS, you've always got read, write, execute, read, write, execute, read, write, execute for the owner, for the group, and for everyone. I want you to keep that in mind because later when we get into working with the command line, you're going to be seeing this again. It's a regular day for this common nerd as he works with a slightly bloated operating system that provides features that sometimes have way too many options. Welcome to the File Explorer Zone. All right, folks, well listen, the CompTIA A Plus really wants you to play with File Explorer, and so do I. File Explorer is the primary tool by which we look at all the files and folders on a Windows system. It has been around with about 17 different names since I had a big thick pile of strawberry blonde hair. So the bottom line is that with Windows 10 we call it File Explorer. It is a powerful tool and has some great features, and you need to understand about it a little bit, and that's what this episode's all about. So let's start off with the default interface. So what you're looking at right here is the default interface for File Explorer, and if you want to start up File Explorer, it's going to be on your quick launch on your taskbar, but if you actually want to just start it up, you can type File Explorer, up it comes. Yep, you can have multiple copies of it. I need to deal with that C drive. So first off, let's get comfortable with some terminology here. First of all, over here, this is what we call the navigation pane, and this is the actual main pane. And you have a few more options here. So let's click on View. If you want to turn off the navigation pane, you can. This is very old school look. I kind of like the navigation pane though, personally. You can also turn on a preview pane. So if I want to, I just click once on something, it'll give me a preview if it can, depending on what it is. This is an executable, so I can't really do a preview there. We also have the details pane, which is very convenient. A lot of times if you just want some quick information about a particular file, you can go ahead and get that here. Now you notice I've got a lot of information here. I can change this as well. So if I want to use great big icons or small icons, try to get some idea what they call content, details, which is my personal favorite, and I tend to always use this one because, well, I like it. And let's go ahead and get my navigation pane back. And while we're here, let's turn off the details pane. So there you go. This is the Windows default and the Mike Myers personal preference of how we set this guy up initially. So what I want to do is take a look at the navigation pane, and you're going to have some stuff in here. First of all is quick access. This is your desktop downloads documents and then other stuff that you've been clicking on a lot, and Windows on its own picks these. If you don't want them on there, you can just right click and click on Remove from quick access and it'll take it away. If you want to put something on here, you can. You just reverse the process. You go through, you find a particular folder you like, and then you right click it and you can add it to quick access. So people get all kind of persnickety about how they like to have this set. Now you'll see the little pins here. That shows that these are permanent. No matter what you're in File Explorer, these are always going to show up unless you take them out. They can be taken out too. These guys here will change based on what you've been looking at. The other part is your computer itself. So this PC, oh, and by the way, while we're in here, if you right click on this PC and hit Properties, this is a great way to get to system information. And that's the way I do it, but just a little trick there. Anyway, so this is going to be showing your desktop and documents. This is information. We do a lot of recording stuff. But what I like is right down here. So you can see these are all the drives that I'm currently using. And if I want to go to any one of these drives, I can just click on it and I'm there. Next one is going to be cloud. So if you have like a OneDrive account, which will always be there, but there are other cloud clients that you can use, third-party tools, they can also appear here. Dropbox, for example, if I had Dropbox loaded, I can also have that appear here as well. And the last one is way down here at the bottom, right here. This is my network. So I can actually see shared folders on other computers in my network, and I can access them if I want to. A lot of people like to customize their File Explorer, and that's great. In order to do this, though, we have to take a look at some of our view options. So let's take a look at View and then Options. So we click on View, and right here is Options. This is a really powerful place. Let me show you some of the stuff it can do. First of all, we have the general options. So this is a matter of personal choice. For example, if I open File Explorer on my navigation, is it going to go straight to this PC or is it going to go to quick access? A matter of personal choice to you. Anytime you open a folder, does it stay in this window or do you want it to keep popping open new windows? If you want to torture yourself, turn this on and pretty soon as you click around, you're going to have 47 windows open on your computer. I recommend leaving it the default. So if you want to open an item, you can either use a traditional double click or you can use a single click. All right, so last one is privacy. So you can say show recently used files in quick access, or if you want to turn that off, this is where you do it. And you can also have show frequently used folders in quick access. And you can also clear the history. You know, in case you've been going into folders you weren't supposed to, this is where you can clear all that. Now there's another option in here, and I don't know if you noticed it, but it said View. So we've been in the general options. Now we're going to go into the View options, and you need to be a little bit careful here. You can't really break anything by messing around with this stuff, but a lot of things may appear that you don't anticipate. So let's do it with Mike so you understand what's going on. So as we click on View, what you want to do is take a look at some of the options here. One of the ones that I like is Show Hidden Files, Folders, and Drives. Mike, are you telling me that there's hidden stuff on my computer? Well, there is. What we're going to be talking about right now is something called attributes. I'm going to close this, but an attribute is nothing more than some settings that you can apply to a folder and a file to define certain kind of interesting aspects. The best way to see this is in action. So I'm going to pick an arbitrary, this is a file, and I'm going to go to Properties. Now, I want you to look down here. Do you see where it says Attributes? I can set a read-only attribute, which means it cannot be deleted. You can't modify it either. Or I can set it as hidden. How exciting is this? I could just click on one button and now that hidden file is going to disappear and nobody's going to see it, right? Well, watch. Right now, it's disappeared. Hey, fantastic. So if you want to hide something, all you got to do is set an attribute of hidden and it's gone. Well, let's take a little look here. So let's go back to Options and back to View. And we can say Show Hidden Files, Folders, and Drives. Watch what happens. And it's back. So if you think this attribute of hidden is going to hide your stuff, well, it won't hide it from me. So just be aware that that option's there. There's a few more attributes I want to show you though. So we go back into Properties. I'm going to unhide that for now. But you click on Advanced, and here's a few more that we can have. Number one, file is ready for archiving. When you get into backup, we'll talk about that in more detail. Allow this file to have context indexed in addition to file. And what they're trying to say there is that when you're searching for stuff within Windows, it has an indexing feature that allows your searches to run like 100 times faster. The problem is with indexing is that it's going to take up some hard drive space. So people balance this back and forth. In general, if your hard drive isn't completely filled, like mine's getting to be, you always want indexing on, and by default it's on, and it just makes your searches faster in File Explorer. That's all it is. A couple more here, and we've covered these in other episodes. Compress contents to save disk space. It will squish the file. And encrypt it, and that's your encrypting file system. And again, these options are covered in other episodes, so I'm not going to repeat all that. So that's all attributes are. They're individual bits that are set with a file that define certain features. These aren't all the attributes. You can also have attributes, for example, system, which only will show critical system files. And you even have another attribute called directory. That's right. That's how your computer tells a file from a directory, because some attribute is set. All right. So I'm going to go ahead. Let me just cancel out of there. Let's go back into view one more time. Go into options. Back to view options. And let's take a look at a couple other interesting ones. Here's one that says hide extensions for known file types. I'm going to uncheck that, and let's see what happens. Now all of a sudden you'll see all of these files have a 3-letter extension. This is how we do associations. Basically, Microsoft Word is a word processing program I have on there. I can go in and set an association that all files with the extension docx, if I double click on them, then they're opened in Word. So that's what an association is. You can even see this. So here's a JPEG file. This is a picture. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to go to Properties. And you'll see right now it's associated with the built-in Microsoft Photos program. But if I want to change it, I can, and here's why I make that change. So what is going to happen here is Windows is going to go, okay, these are the programs that I know that can open JPEGs. So if I want to, and I want to put it to Microsoft Paint, and I'll hit OK. Now anytime I double click on a JPEG, it opens up in Paint. And that's all that file association means. Now you can actually change associations by right-clicking on any particular file type, but it tends to be in File Explorer where we do that. There's a couple other features I want to show you. Now one other feature that's actually kind of cool is I want you to look right here where it says Manage. So what's taking place here is that Windows understands by association what these different things are. So if I click, for example, here on a folder, there's nothing here to really manage per se. But if I click on an executable and I click on Manage, it'll say things like, for example, do I want to run it as an administrator? Do I want to troubleshoot compatibility? These are things that I'm going to be looking at when I'm dealing with these different types of files. If I click on a video, I'm going to get a whole different set of things under Manage than if I clicked on a Word document. But it can be an awful convenient way to do stuff and let Windows through File Explorer sort all that for you. All right. You know what? I'm having so much fun right now. I want to go back into view options because there's a couple more that are really cool. Oh, by the way, if you make a bunch of changes here, you can apply this to all folders just by clicking here, and no matter what you open going forward, it'll show up. Anyway, so what else do we have here? Here's an interesting one that says hide protected operating system files. So I'm going to click on this and watch what happens here. Now remember, I was saying some programs have the attribute of being system files. Basically, we're just showing those up. Now they're not going to be in here. I'm going to have to go over to my C drive. And all of a sudden, you see how these are slightly lighter colored? That's because these are system files. They're like double secret hidden. They're hidden not because they have the hidden attribute, they're hidden because they have the system attribute. And this can often be a nice way if you're trying to debug something and you're trying to find a hidden file or a system file, just going in here and turning that on. I am so comfortable with it on my systems in the office and at home. I leave these on all the time. Windows runs fine with them turned on. Just be aware that those options are there. I have just barely touched the coolness that is File Explorer. As a Windows guy, I live in this one particular utility. We're always clicking around looking for programs and that kind of thing. File Explorer is going to be your best buddy. Take some time and play with it. You're going to really enjoy all of these features. It drives me crazy to talk about users and groups and NTFS permissions without giving you a little tease to the concept of network shares. The problem is that every Windows system suffers from a long history of a very old program called Microsoft LAN Manager. Microsoft LAN Manager predates Windows. It was a tool where you had operating systems of your forefathers with names like DOS, and you had to install this other thing just to be able to look at other people's hard drives. So the challenge is that Microsoft LAN Manager lives and breathes in the most recent, most modern Windows system there is. So we end up having two very different things. We have NTFS permissions, and then we have network shares. Let me show you how this breaks down. So here is a Windows system, and it has two local users. It's going to be Joe and Janet. Joe and Janet have set up all kinds of NTFS permissions. There's a particular folder that they use called C:\Fred. Joe and Janet like to access this. However, sometimes Janet's not over there. Janet is over on her machine over here on the network. And the problem is Janet wants to get access to this folder. You cannot do this with NTFS. NTFS may not care about networking, but it has no networking function built into it. What we use is a feature called network shares. The problem is when Janet's over here, she can't see all of the folders that she has access to over here. So what we do is we light up network shares that basically advertise out on the network saying this particular folder is available. So what will happen is Janet will first connect to that, and then because of her NTFS permissions, she can actually do whatever she read, write, modify, whatever it is. So there's two things going on. We have a network share which advertises all of these shares out there, and then we have the NTFS once you get to that individual system. Network shares are absolutely fabulous. Network shares, you don't even need NTFS. If you want to, you can format a drive with exFAT or something like that, or I guess if it's small enough, FAT32, put your Windows on there, the whole shebang, and you can access shared folders and files over the network. The trick is how do you go about sharing? Now, I'm going to go into a lot more detail in this when we get into the network episodes, but I want to make sure we're comfortable with the concept called Universal Naming Convention, or UNC. So basically what we do is, well, let's just put it right here. So I've got this folder called C:\Fred. Okay? And what I want to do is, as this computer, I want to present it to the network and say, you may use this. I am offering this as a resource. And what will happen is we create a universal naming convention, and it looks something like this. You put 2 backslashes, and then you put the name of the machine serving it. So we'll say this computer here is Mike's PC. So there we go, / Mike's PC. And then you have to name whatever you're sharing. So it's C:\Fred. We're just going to call it something really creative like, here, put another slash, and we're going to call it Fred C. Get the idea? This is a universal naming convention, and for us to access shared resources, we have to be able to connect to these. Now again, we're going to touch on this here, but other episodes in my networking section are really going to go into detail. But make sure you recognize UNC when you see it. So let's go ahead and start doing some sharing. You ready? So I've got this folder on my D drive called Timmy, and I want to share it on the network. So I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to click Give Access To, and I'm going to say who I want to share that. So first of all, I believe Janet is in here. Let's type in Janet. And because I've already created the user Janet, you'll see that she now has read access to this folder. Network shares don't have nearly the power of NTFS. They predate NTFS. This is old stuff. However, it's a good, quick, and dirty, and it doesn't care what kind of file system you have. So when I select a share like this, I basically get two options, read and read write. Read means I can just read anything. I can't copy anything to the folder. I can't change the file I'm reading. Can't do anything other than read it. And read write basically means you can do anything you want. In fact, in the old days, we used to call that modify, but I'm old and those are old versions of Windows. So you either have read or read write, but take one more peek here. Do you see owner? Owner simply means Bob created this folder. That's really all that boils down to. Bob can do anything he wants. But here's me. Yep, that's my email address too. Say hi sometime. I can also do anything I want because I have read-write permissions. We can change this if we want. For example, if I want to give Janet read-write, I just click on there and she's got it. That's really all it takes. So you'll notice that we have a number of different people who have access to this particular file. Now, I've already clicked once, but take a look right here. So what you're actually looking at is this is the UNC for that share. And the share is called whack whack desktop whack Timmy, and that's because when Bob set this up, he already pre-established a share called Timmy on there. I could change that name to anything I want. It doesn't have to be Timmy. Just because the folder is called Timmy, I could type in there, I love bananas, and that's a legitimate share. So let's go ahead and hit done. Now there's one more way to share. I'm going to do this one really quick. Watch this. Everyone. Basically, anybody who can get to my system via the network can go ahead and access at whatever level you set whatever's in there. Now you'd say to yourself, well, Mike, that sounds like a terrible idea because I don't want just anybody in there. Well, the answer is something called Microsoft Best Practices. Microsoft Best Practices says very simply, look, NTFS is the king. That's what we do. If you want to share a folder, go ahead and share it, but make it wide open to everybody. You don't make any restrictions. Never use read or anything like that. And instead, use NTFS permissions to control exactly what people can do. So while we do have read and read-write access, remember, Microsoft says if you're going to share something, make it wide open and then use good NTFS permission control to limit what people can do. And that's a good idea. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let everybody in on there. And we've all got a hold of Timmy. All right. What I want to do now is I want to actually access other people's shares. So to do that, that's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to go out on my network. And I can pick an arbitrary system. Here's something called Total FS3. And here are all the shares that are on that computer. This is a big server system, okay? I mean, it still works even with individual computers, but it's not uncommon for one computer to have lots of different shares out there. So now I can pick a particular share and double click on it, and I can see all kinds of fun stuff in here. Here I can do whatever I need to do. I don't have to do anything special. I can just find if there's a Word document in there, click, 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 boom, 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 and assuming I have the right NTFS permissions, then I can just open it up and do whatever I want to do. But there are some situations where I don't just want to use a UNC to get to something. Sometimes I need something that's kind of more permanent. And in that case, we go through a process called mapping. So let me show you what mapping means. I go into this users folder all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to map the network drive. I just hit right click. And it's going to say, great, here's the UNC. What drive letter do you want it to have? So I'm going to leave it with Z, that's fine. And you also see this checkbox right here. This says reconnected sign-in. So next time after I log off this computer and log back in, he's going to go and reconnect and make this Z drive. If this is unchecked, this will only work if I have this checkbox checked. Otherwise, if I turn it off like I did right there, well, it's going to be good only until I log off. And the next day or whenever I come back, that Z drive won't be there, and I'm going to have to remap the drive. So this is a matter of personal choice. A lot of times I'm like, I only need it for the day, so I'm going to uncheck that, whereas I like it here every morning, I'm going to keep it checked. You could also connect with different credentials. So if I want to, when that Z drive is accessed, it'll make a little pop-up and it'll say, log in under a different name. You've got to remember that when you're using work groups, each different computer has different usernames and passwords. Just because you've logged in here as Bob with a password of something, when you go to somebody else's share, you're not going to have any access to it unless you have that local account. So I'm going to, because I have access, I'm just going to hit finish. And now look right there. So you can see there's my Z drive, all properly mapped and ready to go. Look, this is just a quick overview. I just want to make sure, because we've done all this NTFS, that you conceptualize the difference between NTFS and network shares. Go check my networking chapter to get a lot more detail on how all this works. NTFS is fantastic security for your files and folders, but there's a lot of other stuff that happens on your computer where you'd like a little security. For example, what if you want everybody to have passwords that are at least 10 characters long? Or what if you have Bob, who's way out in Denver, and we don't want him walking up to this machine when he's here in town and logging in, but from Denver we want him to be able to log in. So log in remotely versus logging in locally. There's lots of little security stuff that Windows takes care of via what we call our security policies. Now we're going to be setting up policies for just this computer, so we call it a local security policy. So let me show you how this all works. So local security policy is an application that we run. Let me center it because I like it in the center. Now, what you have here is a whole big pile of things you can set up for your system. So let's start off with account policies. You have two options in here, password policy and account lockout policy. The reason they're at the top is because people love to use these. So let's take a look at some of these and make sure you understand, because it's going to be on the exam. Number one, maximum password age. That means how long can a password be there until they have to change it. So right now I've got it set as 42 days. Minimum password length is 0 characters. If I wanted to, I can come in here. Now it's going to make me change a few things. Watch this. I'm going to make it required 8 characters. Now the moment I do that, it goes ahead and sets this for me. Now I have to do 8 characters. Password must meet complexity requirements. Click on this and I enable this. So now what's going to happen is that I can't just use a password of 8 ones, for example. I'm going to have to use upper and lower alphas and then some numeric value. It's built into Windows just to make more complex passwords. Now we can understand a few more of these. First of all, enforce password history. By 0, I'm going to say you don't have to remember any passwords, but let's just set it to 3 for fun. And what we've just done is we've go, look, you're going to have to change your password every 42 days, and then when you change it, you can't use the same password, or at least the last 3 passwords. So that's how we can control that particular issue. So we're all set except for one more I want to talk about, and that is store passwords using reversible encryption. Most of the time when you store a password on a Windows system, it has an unreversible encryption known as a hash. And we'll talk about hashes in other episodes. However, if you ever needed to easily crack a password for some reason, here you could go ahead and enable this, and it'll store it in a much more, not nearly as secure, but sometimes if you want to recover a password quickly, you have that option. I always keep it disabled. So this sets up some of the passwords, but what if people can't log in right? What if they keep using the wrong password? I mean, there's a certain point where somebody keeps using the wrong password. I want to stop them. I want to lock them out because they might be bad guys. And that's where you have to go to this next tab, Account Lockout Policy. So, first of all, we have Account Lockout Threshold. So right now it's set to 0 invalid attempts, but I can say set this to 5. Now it needs to do a couple other things. I'll explain this in just a sec. So what's going to happen is after 5 invalid logon attempts, you're going to be locked out for a certain amount of time. By default, it's set to 30 minutes. I can change that. So maybe if I want to be a nicer person, I'll set it to 10 minutes. So after 5 attempts, you're locked out for 10 minutes. Now it's going to have to deal with this, which we're going to talk about right now. And that is reset account lockout counter after a certain amount of time. Okay, so you're logging in and you type in once. Oop, wrong, that's 1 try. You type in wrong again. Oops, that's 2 tries. So if you do it 5 times, you're locked out, right? Well, this other setting says, how long do I keep you at 2 before I set you back to 0? Get the idea? And that's what reset account lockout after means. So usually we set these to the same value, but again, that's a matter of personal choice. Okay, so passwords are important and logins are important, but there's a few others I want to show you here, at least give you a quick touch on. Take a look here under local policies. Now we cover audit policy in other episodes when we're talking about auditing. However, just get an idea, this is just some of the built-in stuff. So allow log on locally. Here's where we could say yes or no to that. If I can go in here and make sure that Bob's not a member of that and he won't be able to log in locally unless he's a member of the users group. So there's all kinds of different little options in here that really depend on you and what your needs are. And then even more complex is security options. So I can do things like, here's a fun one, rename the administrator account. How would you like to change the administrator account to Timmy? This is where it's done. I wouldn't recommend doing that, folks. I'm just saying this is the type of policies that you can configure with your local security policies. So this works great. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump onto another computer and we're going to do this again. Now this other computer is a member of a domain. We're going to see something very different. Watch this. So here I am on my domain computer and I'm going to fire up local security policy. Now this time when I fire it up, it'll look just the same. However, let's take a look at something. So we'll see, hey, wait a minute. It looks like, do you see how this is all nicely colored? That means that something's been set. Yeah, it is. 1 password remembered. Well, let's change that. Wait, I can't change it. There's a very good reason why you can't change it, and that's because we have domain policies on here. On my Windows Server system, he not only has all of those local policies, but he has like a bazillion more, even more complicated ones. And the administrator of this domain overrides my local policy with his own domain policies. Anytime you're working with your local security policy on your own machine, and you're a member of a domain, and suddenly you have things you can't change on your local security policy, that's because your domain administrators have set up their own group policies that override your stuff. So be aware of that because I'm pretty sure you're going to see it on the exam. One of the biggest jobs of maintaining and optimizing any operating system is patch management. Look, the bottom line is that there's a lot of evil out in the world. There are bad guys who are finding things that will allow them to attack your computer. There are bugs in different types of software that need to be dealt with. our firmware that's built into our systems might need an update from time to time. Patch management is the world where we go about updating all of the built-in firmware and, well, mainly software to make sure that they're the most secure, safe, and stable they can be. Now, there's two big separations when we talk about patch management. In an enterprise environment, patch management is a very big deal where somebody wants to make some type of update and they fill out a form and there's a committee that overviews it and all that. What we're going to be dealing with here for the A+ exam is the actual nuts and bolts of doing a patch management for different operating systems. Now, I want to start with Windows because, well, I'm a Windows guy. And remember that the A+ covers a lot of different versions of Windows, so I want to start with one of the oldie goldies, and this is Windows 7, and it's called Windows Update. Windows Update is built into all versions of Windows. Back in the Windows 7 days, it looked something like this. We could go through a process of checking for updates, and then it would give us different updates. So here we see we have 31 important updates available. So let's take a look what Microsoft gives us. What we're seeing here are a number of different types of updates for, we have malware, we have updates for the operating system itself, we have security updates. We can actually click on these and get more details about what they exactly are. In the Microsoft world, we use what are called knowledge base, or these KB values that will define in great detail exactly what those are. We could look them up online. So you'll see we have important and optional. So what do we got for optional? So it's going to be a platform update for Windows 7. I'm probably going to have to be looking some of this stuff up. When it comes to Windows Update, in general, I'm the type of person who likes to see what the update is and then choose it for myself whether I actually want to do that update. Now, there's a third type of update that we're not seeing here, and those are called critical updates. And those, if they find a really bad problem, and they're going to mark them as critical, and those we probably want to do. The thing is that with Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 8.1, you had some control over this, and let me show you how we could do some of those controls. So if you look here in Windows Update, there's an option that says Change Settings. And here I've got some choices. I can install everything automatically, recommended. We can download updates, but let me choose whether to install them. We can check for updates, but let me choose whether to download and install them, or we could never check for updates. Along with this, Microsoft says when, every day at 3 a.m., we can change that if we want. If you're working the night shift, that might be a good idea. It could also give recommended updates and then allow all users to install updates. So the Windows Update gives us some pretty good control on this. There's a few other features that'll show up. For example, if I have Microsoft products on here, I can go ahead and perform updates for, say, Office or whatever else you might have. If you have third-party tools, you're going to have to update those individually, and it's not uncommon. For example, powerful programs like Adobe Creative Cloud actually runs by itself at all times. It's got a little tool that checks for updates in case you might need them. So if it's a Microsoft product in Windows, you can use Windows Update. Other products, you're going to have to count on them, or you're going to have to manually check. Now keep in mind, Windows Update isn't going to cover everything. I'm not talking just applications. For example, device drivers. A lot of device drivers are not going to be updatable unless you actually go to their sites and check to see if there are updates available. Video card manufacturers will also put little programs in your taskbar that will be monitoring, and they'll give you information for those. But nothing beats just going out there and checking on an individual basis. Now, I will add that with Windows 8 and 8.1, we began to see options where Windows itself would check for driver updates. But I'm still the type who likes to go out and check for himself. So now we're talking about updating the operating system, we're talking about updating the applications, we're updating the drivers, and the last one is going to be firmware. The big piece of firmware that people like to update is the system BIOS. And they'll go ahead and flash that. Now, to me, that is a very risky job. We talk about that back in the BIOS episode, so I'll let you review those. But that can very much be a part of patch management as well. All right, so we've got all these different things to patch. We've taken a look at Windows 7. Let's do this again, but let's look at it in the world of Windows 10. Some things have changed. Windows 10 definitely changes a few things. He's even got himself an update in there, and he wants to restart. But let's take a look and see what's happening here. First of all, you'll see change active hours. What we're doing here with Windows 10, it says, this is when I'm busy. Don't update me around here. We can take a look at our update history, so we get an idea of what's already been updated. You can actually click on individual ones and get some idea of what it's all about. Well, that's an oldie. If we want to, we can uninstall updates. So if you find something naughty in here and you want to get rid of them, you can do it right here. And last is recovery options. And basically what that's saying here is there are ways to completely back out of all of your updates in one big shot. But that's not something we want to do too terribly often. What's interesting here is, unlike what we saw in Windows 7, there is no option within Windows Update and Windows 10 to say, well, let me pick them or download them and let me choose. That's because in Windows 10, you have no choice. The updates will come down to your system and you will get updated. You can pause it, and that'll delay it for a while. That depends on what the update is, but you cannot stop updates. The only way you can is if you're in an enterprise environment running a very specific type of Windows called Windows Enterprise, and in that case, the actual people who are administrating your network, they're in control of these updates and they'll take care of it. So that is a really big difference between the older versions of Windows and Windows 10. Now, the whole idea of patch management is not unique to Windows by any stretch. First of all, things like, for example, Linux, they certainly do patching. Let's take a look at some patch management using good old Ubuntu. Ubuntu does a particularly good job of patch management because it provides two separate but complementary methods to do it. So first of all, here we are looking at Ubuntu's software and updates. And if you were watching on the Windows 7 part, you're going to see a lot of stuff that looks pretty familiar. First of all, Canonical, these are the people who own Ubuntu. So what they're going to do is, what do you want to update? So it's saying Ubuntu stuff, stuff in the Linux community, proprietary stuff, and software restricted by copyright or legal issues, which is pretty rare in the Linux world, but it does happen. Other software, like in particular, Canonical has a lot of people who work directly with them, and if you wanted to choose those, you can do that. Now, for updates, so you can say exactly what kind of updates do you want, what they consider important security updates, recommended, and unsupported, which a lot of people choose not to do. And here you can say, when do these things happen? Daily? Every 2 days? Do you want to download and install automatically? Do you want to download automatically, display automatically? That looks kind of familiar. And when do you want these to show up with other ones? You can do these weekly, every 2 weeks, however you want to handle that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this because there's something even more cool, and that is Live Patch. Basically, Live Patch is almost the equivalent of Windows 10, where it's like, just set this up, take care of my patches, and let me not have to worry about it. Now keep in mind, Ubuntu is particularly good at patch management. There are hundreds and hundreds of Linux distros that do not have quite this slick of an interface, and if you watch in my command line interface chapter, we're going to be talking about tools like apt-get that provide you a way to do this from a command line, which is pretty cool. All right, well, there's one more to talk about, and when it comes to Slick, Mac does a pretty good job of handling patch management, and really it boils down to just a couple of interfaces. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a traditional Mac OS update screen. It's using the App Store. The problem is this version of the CompTIA A+ came out just before the Mojave update of Mac OS, and we saw some changes here. So let's take a look after Mojave. Mac separates your OS update from your application update. So as you can see here, we've got system preferences open, and you can see an OS update. and then under the App Store, you can see some updates for applications. So the bottom line, with today's operating systems, patch management is almost a non-issue. With the latest versions of Windows, with great Linux distros, and the latest version of Mac OS, it's almost automated. The bottom line is, you'll always want to patch because that's where the bad guys get to you. A big part of maintaining and optimizing our operating systems is keeping the mass storage that we put those operating systems on happy. So in this episode, I want to talk about error checking and optimization of our mass storage. Error checking simply means, like it sounds, to check for errors on our hard disk drives and our SSDs. Optimization is a way that we can organize our hard disk drives and to a lesser extent SSDs so that they simply run more efficiently. So let's go ahead and start this. Luckily, we have both of these tools at the exact same place. So here I am on my D drive. So all I have to do is right-click, select Properties, and you'll see a tab that says Tools. So the first one I want to talk about is error checking. So let's go ahead. It's pretty easy to run. Let's just run this guy. So we go through this scan, whatever that means. Yay! It didn't find anything. Let's click on Show Details. Hey, look, it's Event Viewer. So if we take a look at this particular event, we'll bring it up, and we can scroll through, and there's something called CHKDSK, better known as check disk. Come back during my command line, and we'll talk about him again. And we scroll through all this goobity-gok, but there's really only one thing I want to show you right here. Windows has scanned the file system and found no problems. No further action is required. Lovely, huh? So, what just happened? Well, it's pretty simple. Windows went through and checked the file table for that particular partition and verified each entry in its file table was in good order. So, just as though we were running format without the quick format, it's going through and checking every one of the LBA blocks to verify that it can read and write data. So on this particular system, because it's an SSD, it runs really, really quick. This can take a lot longer on a hard disk drive. The beautiful part about this is that it is a great way to verify that your drives are good and that drives can get bad blocks from time to time, and you know what? Just run a error checker and you'll be able to verify everything's okay. So error checking is very, very important. It's a good way to verify that our mass storage is in good shape. However, it's not the only thing. The other thing we want to do is we go through optimization, better known in the old days as defragment or just good old defrag. Now, for old techs like me, defrag was one thing, but optimization is a bigger deal. Let me show you what I mean. This is a super zoom in of a tiny part of an SSD. What we're looking at here are these individual small blocks or pages. The page is the atom of the SSD, and they store anywhere from like 2 to 8 kilobytes, a very small amount. So if I'm actually writing a single file, I may end up taking a number of these before the entire file is written. However, each page is stored in a block. And a single block is going to store anywhere from 32 to 256. There's some variance in here of these individual pages. Here's the problem. I cannot erase individual pages. I can only erase entire blocks. So if I start writing in more files and then all of a sudden one of these gets erased, I can't use these because I would have to erase the entire block. So back in the old days of SSD, they did all kinds of ridiculous things like try to move this piece of file over to a different block so we could erase it. It was a real pain. What fixed everything is something called trim. Trim very simply writes into individual, now unused pages available for use. I don't know what the actual binary value is. We're just going to type in AFUs. Now keep in mind, I'm not erasing, I'm writing in available for use. By doing this, the operating system could go to an SSD and say, trim yourself up, and it would get itself organized in such a way that we could begin to reuse these pages without erasing entire blocks. It was a great thing, and it is a great thing. So part of optimization when we're talking about SSDs is really running trim more than anything else. So you know what? Let's do a little optimization. It ought to be fun. So let me right-click on this drive. I'm going to select Properties. Let's click on Tools and Optimize. Now, the one thing I want you to look at here, more than anything else, you'll notice that Windows knows the difference between a solid-state drive and a hard disk drive. Now, these are all pretty clean, as you can see here, so I can't even analyze them. Analyze says, check them out for me and tell me what you think. But I can go ahead and run the optimization. I want you to watch right here as I click on Optimize. Let's do that again. Do you see where it says trimmed? It goes through and runs a trim. Now, hard disk drive's a totally different animal. I run Optimize here, and you'll notice it was very, very quick. It ran analysis. It didn't find any sectors that weren't already arranged in the right place. Back in the old days of operating systems, doing things like error checking and optimization were manual processes that I'd have to go into individual systems and run. Today, on all operating systems, these are automated processes. If you want to see how Windows does this on an automated basis, check out my Task Scheduler episode. The whole reason we mess with these computers is to run applications. So if I'm going to be managing and optimizing an operating system, I am definitely going to be dealing with applications. So in this episode, I just want to cover the concept of installing and uninstalling applications. Sounds easy, right? Well, let's watch. First of all, let's do it the nice way. I'm going to install an application right now. This is called Audacity, and people who are into sound love that stuff. And what we're going to be seeing here is an install program. I pick where I want to install it. Notice that it's installing into Program Files x86. That means it's a 32-bit application. Nothing wrong with that. If it was installing it straight into Program Files without that open parenthesis x86 close parenthesis, then I know it's a 64-bit program. Windows looks at it and knows. This is where it's going to go, and we hit install. When you install a program, you are, number one, putting it into either Program Files if it's 64-bit or Program Files x86 if it's a 32-bit program, but there's a lot more than that. An individual application might have dynamic link libraries, it might have support files. It's almost certainly going to be updating the registry one way or another. It could be putting in special data files. It could be creating temporary files. So when you install one application, you could be making a really big effect all over your computer. And luckily, all operating systems do a nice job of installing and uninstalling. So what else does it want me to do here? Sign my life away a little more? Okay. I'm not even going to launch it. I know it works. So what's happened here is I've installed this Audacity program, which, by the way, if you're into sound, is a great tool. Now, what I want to do is take a look at this program the way Windows sees it. Now, you have two different places to do this. One is within Settings, and I'm going to kind of skip over that because I'm a little bit more interested in right here. What I want you to check out is Programs and Features in the Control Panel. So as we scroll through here, hey, look at that. Audacity's right up top there, so it's really easy for us to pick out. This Programs and Features tool is incredibly handy. If you're looking for a program, you can sort alphabetically, you can sort by install date, you can sort by size if you're looking for big programs to clear out of your system. The nice thing is here is the actual program itself. Now if I click on this, you'll see I have all kinds of information about that particular program, but most importantly, you'll see uninstall. Let's go ahead and click on that. Do I really want to do this? Yes, I do. So, Audacity uninstall complete. Some elements could not be removed. These can be removed manually. And this is the big challenge when it comes to applications. Applications don't always uninstall nicely. In particular, a lot of them will have specialized data sets or configurations, and they really don't want you to install those because they think you might be moving and they want you to grab some INI file or some data folder. In these cases, you're going to have to know the application, and I'm going to have to jump on the Audacity website and see what it's leaving over. It's probably some configuration stuff, and I'm going to have to go in and into the folder, delete a folder manually. That's just the way things go. So these are the types of processes you have to go with uninstallation. In fact, this could be a real challenge. One of the bigger issues we run into when we're trying to install something and it's being naughty is that it can leave residue on your computer. When I say residue, I'm talking about registry settings that no longer have anything that they're tied to, things in temporary files, stuff like that. And in that situation, it can be really tricky. In my opinion, now this isn't on the exam, but you should know this, there's really only one tool left out there that does a pretty good job of cleaning up messes that poor uninstallations leave behind, and that's Piniform's CC Cleaner. So I just happen to have CC Cleaner installed. Now the free version is pretty darn good, but you might want to consider buying their more pro version. Now this is going to clean up a lot more than the registry. So this is all kinds of web browser stuff, and I don't even want to deal with any of this. Temporary files, but again, these are browser things. Clean all this up. It's not that I have a problem with those, but what I'm interested in, and the reason I still support this tool, is because its ability to clean up messes within the registry itself. So I'm going to go ahead and let that run. And basically, it's finding a lot of homeless stuff that needs to just get deleted. And it goes on and on. Now, the thing I need to warn you about CC Cleaner, it is not for the faint of heart. Definitely you want to make a backup of your registry and have it ready to go before you run this thing. It has been known to take away things that you wish weren't taken away, so use it at your own risk. So this gives you an idea of some of the things we deal with applications that we install and uninstall. But did you know that every copy of Windows comes with a whole bunch of applications and they're just waiting for you to install them? Let's take a look. Here's Internet Information Services, or IIS. I can click on this. In fact, if you want to, you can be more detailed, but you can just click here, hit OK, and you are installing a web server, not a web client, not a web browser, an actual server onto your system. And by default, it's pretty much up and running out of the box. It does a pretty good job when you need a quick and dirty web server in case you wanted to share some information within your network, something like that. This is just one of lots and lots of interesting tools. Most interesting tools are network-based, so check out my network episodes and we'll be seeing more of these Windows features. So be aware that we have all of these fun tools in there that you can play with. The bottom line is, when you're working with applications, you need to understand they must be installed one way or another. With luck, you'll be able to take advantage of tools like programs and features to be able to happily uninstall them, whatever you might want to do. And remember, sometimes it's reduced to CC Cleaner and manual cleaning. A big part of maintaining any operating system is making sure that if something goes wrong in the future, you can recover from it. Now there's a number of ways we can do that. One of the things we can do is System Restore. Now we've mentioned System Restore in other episodes, but this time I really want to go into the guts of this thing and really enjoy it. So System Restore is easy, and we get to it through System Properties. So number one, we got to go into configure. So number one, you have to make sure that system protection is turned on. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do what we're about to do. Number two, what we're going to be doing is saving a lot of information. We're going to be saving application information. We're going to be saving the registry. We're going to be saving certain system files. And that's going to take up some drive space. So right now, you have to set what you want to do. Right now, I will store up to 9.26 gigabytes of stuff before I'll just not allow myself to make any more of these restore points. And so far I've used about 300 megabytes. And if you were desperate for space, you could always come in here, delete all restore points for this drive right here in one great shot. We'll just leave it as it is for now. So what I want to do first of all is create a restore point right now. Now you'll notice that I have protection turned on my C drive and on my D drive. And this little extra drive here, I'm not too worried about him. I don't want to make restore points, so I'm going to leave him off. So let's go ahead and create a restore point. So we give it some name. And we're going to go ahead and create that. So while I'm making that restore point, remember, the restore point does not save like everything is in your computer. It concentrates on your applications, it concentrates on your registry, and it concentrates on what Microsoft calls a few critical system files. Good luck trying to figure out exactly what those are according to Microsoft. So restore points really come into play if I'm adding applications, changing applications, and it also works pretty good if I'm adding device drivers. So that's the other thing to keep in mind when you're using System Restore. You run System Restore first before you do something, then you do something, and then you run it again. And then that way you can return back to either one of these settings. The downside to System Restore is that over time, you can start making so many system restores that it sometimes gets difficult to go back to, well, like my first system restore when I first installed Windows, but since then I've made 4 system restores for different upgrades of my video card, and then I added this application, and all of a sudden it's like, well, if I go back to the original, I'm going to lose all of this stuff. So it can be a challenge sometimes, but if you don't have a system restore, this is just one powerful tool that can help you bring a system back when you're otherwise having trouble. Okay, so I've got my restore point. Now the next point is I can actually restore from a restore point. So here you see I've got a number of different restore points that have been generated. Now the other thing to keep in mind is that Windows itself makes restore points. Windows itself will make a basic restore point pretty much after the initial installation. Now we're not talking about the ones we do where after all of our device drivers are installed and that type of thing. And he won't show them here, but he will automatically grab these if you have to recover data. And we'll be covering recovery in other episodes. So keep in mind is that there's more than what you're seeing right here. So if I want to go ahead and restore something, I just hit it. I'm not going to do it right now because it takes a while, but it will actually bring my system back to whatever one of those statuses were. The other thing to know about is that restore points, even if they're sitting on your hard drive and you can't boot Windows, you can boot to a Windows bootable disk in the Windows recovery environment. We have a whole episode on it, and it will find your restore points and it'll say, hey, I see these. Do you want me to try to load from one of these? So you notice I'm trying to get to my restore points from within Windows. Even if Windows doesn't boot, this stuff still works great. One of the blessings and curses of Microsoft Windows is that it provides so many different ways to back stuff up. Now we saw System Restore already, but System Restore is really more application specific and to a lesser extent device drivers. What if I want to back up my own desktop, my own documents, my own photos? Well, in that case, you're going to have to turn to something else, and that's called Windows Backup and Restore Windows 7. I'll explain in just a minute. Now, in order to take advantage of tools like this, I'm going to need some kind of external mass storage device. So in this case, I've got a SATA drive. It's actually 4 terabytes, and I've got it enclosed in an external USB 3, and I'm just going to plug this into the back. We're going to plug this in. You meet me over on my control panel screen, and I'll show you how this works. Okay, so my drive's plugged in. I can see that right here. So let's go over to Backup and Restore Windows 7. That's right, this is actually the old Windows 7 backup, and here I am in Windows 10, and it's part of my control panel. So the first thing I want to do is take a look over here on the left. This is Create a System Image. So what the system image is actually pretty much a complete image of my system itself. Not the applications, but pretty much my entire Windows folder and anybody underneath there. So you can see that I can do this to my external disk. If I had DVDs, I don't like doing that because they're rarely big enough anymore. I could do it that way. Or I could actually put a UNC in here and save it to the network. I'm going to go ahead and say put it to the hard disk. So what it's now asking me is, well, what would you like me to back up? So if you take a look, I have 3 big partitions on my C drive. I've got my UEFI partition, I've got the C drive itself, and then I have a recovery partition. Those are grayed out, so I'm going to have to back those up. But I also have a few other drives in here, and he says, you want to back those up too? If I wanted to, I could click them right now. So it says, okay, here we go. This could take up to, in this particular case, 214 gigabytes of disk space. So I'm going to go ahead and start that back up. So a system repair disk is different from a system image. A system repair disk is a bootable media that you can begin to start the recovery environment from. In fact, it kind of mimics the function of a Windows installation media, which we generally, once we install Windows, like to set that off to the side. So now we've got a system repair disk and we've got a system image. There's one thing we haven't talked about yet, and that is our personal data. Let's get back in there. So this time I'm going to set up a backup. He wants to go ahead and use that external drive. I'm going to let him. Now we can let Windows choose, or we can do it ourselves. If you let Windows choose, he's going to back up all the personal data in everybody's libraries, everybody's desktop, everybody's everything. And it will also create a system image. Now you can also let me choose, and we can do this manually. And now we can come in and actually select what do we want to back up. So here we have basically if any other new users get created, we'll back up their personal data. We've got a user called Bob, we'll back up his stuff. Here's Mike Myers, here's somebody named Shannon Lemur. So this is all the users that are on this system. If we wanted to, we could also completely copy entire volumes, but to me a system image does a pretty good job. But let's just say I had something really important on that D drive. Here I could pick that up as well. And look down here. Once again, it's going to make a system image of my UEFI partition, my C drive, and my recovery partition. If I've already got one, I don't have to do this again. A lot of people just make one backup here. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to hit next. And notice by default, it's going to do this every Sunday at 7 p.m. I can change the schedule if I want. That's okay. I like Sundays at 7. Save the settings and go ahead and make a backup. So these backups are going to take a while, so we want to be patient. Once you have started to make backups, and in this case, Windows by default does it every week. I could change the schedule to do it every day. The scheduling is completely up to you. The only other thing you need to be careful about here is the backup good? Now, the initial backup is always going to be good. You usually don't have a problem there. But what happens is over time, especially if I keep using the same drive, older backups might just stop working. In the Windows environment, it's easy to test your backups. All you have to do is you go into a restore from the backup in the same screen. You just go in there, and if Windows sees it, you know it's good. So that's an important extra point, and that's something you do on an ongoing basis. Now, backup like this has been around for a long, long time, and you can see it's still valid. So between system restore, system image, and a traditional backup, I've pretty much saved my entire system, and that works beautifully. However, I still have to go through this process, and I still have to remember every Sunday at 7 to go through that. Today, with all operating systems, particularly Windows and Mac OS, we have tool sets that are basically permanently ongoing, constantly backing up. In the Windows world, we call it file history, and on the Macs, we call it time machine. I'm going to do this in Windows. It works pretty much exactly the same in Mac. Let's see how this works. So right here is file history, and all I have to do is turn file history on. It's going to see that I've got this external drive. You really have to have an external drive to do this. It's warning me, it goes, hey, are you using the backup for Windows 7? You can use this too, there's no problem. Just turn it on, and you are automatically being saved. This is all I have to do. You just turn file history on, and in Mac OS, you just turn on Time Machine. Make sure you have a big external drive, and all of your personal information is automatically being saved there. Every time you make some type of change to a particular file, it's going to go ahead and make a copy of it on that drive. There's some adjustability there, but a lot of people like the real-time aspect. Again, it's a matter of personal choice. In fact, file history and Time Machine have become so popular that a lot of people are now saying, why bother with backup? And to be honest with you, I don't have a good answer. We've been doing a lot in the maintaining and optimizing operating systems episodes that we'd like to keep doing over and over again. Disk optimization, backups, all kinds of things like this, where I'd want to just keep doing this over and over. I'd like to schedule them somehow. I would like to schedule these tasks so that they would be done automatically whenever I want them to. And that's the job of Task Scheduler. The cool part about so many of the maintaining and optimizing jobs we do are already preset into the task scheduler. We don't do anything. In fact, by default, most of this stuff's running. I want to show this all to you, and then we're going to set up our own task schedule for one little tiny task. So, first thing we got to do is check out Task Scheduler. To get to Task Scheduler, it's under Administrative Tools. And scroll down through here, and there it is right there, Task Scheduler. Yeah, there's about 3 other places to get to it, but this works for me. So by default, the Task Scheduler is broken into these 3 main screens. This breaks down all the different scheduled tasks and functions that we can schedule if we want. Then this gives us information about whatever we've got clicked on the left-hand side, and this gives us actions we can do to this stuff. So let's go ahead and scroll this guy off to a little bit there. And what I want to do is go through the Task Scheduler library here. And you can see there is all kinds of stuff. I've got Dropbox on here, Adobe's doing something, CC Cleaner's on here, OneDrive. I've got a bunch of things already up and running. So what I want to do is take a look at some of these in a little bit more detail. So the best way to do that is to come over here into Windows and get ready for a lot of stuff to appear. Woohoo! All right? So what we'll do, just as one example, let's go down to Windows Backup. So right here's Windows Backup, and we can see that there's something going on. And let's take a look right here. I've got an automatic backup at 7 p.m. every Sunday. So I can actually click on this and get a detail. So first of all, here's the general information. So basically the name of it and some information I want to put in here. I can run it only when the user is actually logged in. In this case, the user is the system itself. I can run whether the user is logged in or not. And I can also run with highest privileges, which basically means I don't care what's happening, I'm running. Triggers are what actually sets this particular fella off. So here I have a trigger that's set weekly at 7 p.m. every Sunday, starting at a particular date. If I wanted to change this, if I want to make it daily, I can just click right here. Now it's going to happen every day at 7 p.m. I can delay it for a certain amount of time. I can repeat it every hour, every whatever I want to do. So this daily is actually this information right here. I can stop a task if it runs longer than a certain amount of time, and I can give it a date and a time to stop if I want it to just stop after a certain amount of time. So you got some real flexibility on your trigger. Then the action itself is what's going to happen. In this case, it's going to start a program, and actually, if you dig deep in there, this is actually your Windows backup, and that's how you do it. Now you can have conditions in here. For example, start the task only if the computer's been idle for a while. You can start the task only if the computer's on AC power, which is great for laptops. You can wake the computer up to run a task if you want to. So a lot of good conditions you can set in here. And then settings, little things like allow tasks to be run on demand. In other words, you can go ahead and just run this task manually by double clicking on it. If the task fails, what do you want to do? Again, here's the stop the task. So there's a little bit of parallelism in terms of your dialog boxes. Just a lot of little details that are helpful for you. And then the last one is history, and it would give a listing of how many times this has been run. So if we go through this enough, you're going to find a lot of stuff already running, things that we've covered in other episodes. For example, checking your system for errors, optimizing your drives, those are all in there, as well as the Windows backup, which we just saw. So what I want to do now is I want to just make my own little task. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So I'm just going to go up to the task scheduler library, and I am going to create a basic task. Now this is the same information we saw before, but a little bit simpler. We're going to call it Mike wants to paint. And I can put a description in here. So we're going to set a trigger. I want this to happen one time. And I'm going to set it for exactly 4 minutes in the future. And then I want to start a program. And in this case, I'm going to start Microsoft Paint, which I know is in my Windows folder under System 32. So I'm going to hit Next, and I'm going to hit Finish. And now we're going to wait about a little less than 3 minutes. It took me a minute to get that set up. So let's watch what happens. Ta-da! There it is. The coolest part about Task Scheduler is that we really rarely go in there. Microsoft Windows does such a good job of maintaining and optimizing its own operating system that there's not much for us to do, except every now and then if you feel like painting around 5 o'clock, it'll set it up for you.